Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Akura te awa, ko Waitamata te moana, ko Chignell aho. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's very good to be here. It's the first conference on biodiversity that I've ever been to. I've gone to a lot of conferences in my time around trees and arboriculture around the world, and to me I feel like I'm coming home actually in regards to I've always wanted to be involved in conservation and looking after our biodiversity, and yeah, I feel like it's nice to be here. Kia ora. I've got this privilege really to be in charge of Free 2050 Limited. And you know, one of the things I've noticed while I've been in this job for a short period of time is that there's a lot of predator-frees out there. You know, there's Predator-Free New Zealand Trust, there's the Predator-Free program, which is DOC is overseeing, and there's Free 2050 Limited. And our job really is one of those tools in the quiver that New Zealand's got in regards to delivering the 2050 objectives, which is to eradicate possums, stoats and rats and other predators from New Zealand. So it's a great aspiration, and I believe, you know, in the short time I've been in this role and travelled around the country, I've met a lot of people, and a lot of people you're obviously here today that are really passionate, inspired to do this job, and very, very bright people too, and very, very experienced. And I'm a babe in this space in regards to learning all about predator eradication and suppression, but I'm learning quickly and really love to be part of it. PF 2050, the program, is got national, international interest. There's people from all over the world that are very, very interested in whether New Zealand can achieve this goal. I've been approached in my short time here in regards by the US Agricultural Department. You know, it's costing them over $19 billion per annum to with problems just with rats, and they're also interested in regards to conservation on their islands. So we've got a lot of interest, and this is a quote from the New York Times. You know, New Zealand vows to wipe out rats and other invasive predators by 2050. So there's a lot of people internationally looking at New Zealand and this goal that we've got. And that's really exciting, because if we achieve it, and I believe we will, then other people are going to follow our lead. And I was talking to Rude last night, and he was talking about Hawaii in regards to, you know, they've got the ability to do the same thing as New Zealand's achieving, but they're sort of a little bit scared. But they're a much smaller land mass and probably quite achievable to do it before New Zealand. But they just haven't got that drive behind them at the moment with their government. And we have. And I'm pretty excited about that. You know, when the government mentioned in 2016 that they were actually going to become predator-free, you could be quite cynical and sit back and say, oh, well, how are they going to do that? And it's impossible. But you've got to take your hat off to the government to actually have made that statement and get out there and put their neck on the line and have a go. So I believe the new government's going to be 100% behind what we're doing as well, and they'd be silly not to, because the communities out there, when you move around the country, there's a lot of people. It's a movement really in New Zealand now about Free 2050. So the Crown government company, PF 2050 Limited, part of what we want to do is drive scientific research into predator control and eradication. So we've got some money that we want to invest into the science space. We believe that there's a number of ways that we're going to get to being predator-free by 2050, and one of that's going to be through a science technology. We also want to leverage, and that's part of my job, and I believe that's part of why I got shortlisted and chosen for this job is that we want to be able to leverage the money that we've got from the government, and we want to obviously leverage it 2 to 1 is the objective, so that we can get more money from philanthropic organisations and corporations throughout New Zealand and offshore. And I'm really excited about that proposition. I definitely believe I've got some very strong ideas on how we can capture the corporates in our country in regards to getting them on board. Obviously, some are already there. You see a lot with Air New Zealand as a partner with DOC and doing a lot in that space. But there's so many other corporations in New Zealand that I believe when they understand the movement that's happening in New Zealand, they'll want to get behind it, particularly in their own projects in their backyard. And we want to deal very closely with Māori, very important, a lot of knowledge there, obviously over 800 years or more been living in Aotearoa, and so we want to tap into that knowledge. We want to invest into high-value, large-scale predator control projects with that aim to eradicate those 3 pests. We've got a very strong board. We've got 9 directors on the board. We've got Jane Taylor, Sir Rob Fenwick, Jeff Grant, Gary Lane, Tracy Hopapa, Warren Parker, David McLeod, Arihia Bennett and Devon McLennan are all very experienced people in the New Zealand corporate world and in conservation, and it's a privilege to have them on my board and to work with them. Very dedicated to the cause and very influential. And then of course you've got myself, which is part of the story, but we've got Dr. Dan Tompkins, who currently works for Landcare Research. He's our first employment. We've seconded him from Landcare Research to work specifically for Free2050 Limited, and he's heading up our science strategy. And he's done a fantastic job along with Andrew Bryan in regards to the Biological Heritage National Science Challenge, and we've got a robust science strategy that we want to roll out, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. You probably all have heard of this in regards to the goals, and part of them is obviously we want to enlarge the target predator suppression for over 1 million hectares by 2025. I'm going to cover off in a minute, but in the expressions of interest that we've just put out, we've actually got back over 1.7 million hectares of land that groups have come back that they want to be involved in suppression or eradication. And that's obviously right now in 2017, and obviously our ambition is by 2025 we want to have at least 1 million hectares under suppression. So it's definitely achievable. We also want to eradicate more than 20,000 hectares without using fences. We obviously have done a fantastic job on our offshore islands and even on our mainland with sanctuaries with our fences, and now we want to go the next step in that journey and be able to do that without having to put a physical fence up, which is really exciting and also I believe very achievable. I've had a bit of time to deal with Zip down in Bottle Rock, where they've got their research station in regards to looking, got a block there, I think it's 400 hectares, and they're doing a lot of work there in regards to how we can eradicate these predators and how we can defend them. And that's really exciting to see that work being done out there. And I eradicate all predators from all offshore nature reserves by 2025. That's a big ask. And obviously some of the expression of interest that I've had come through as well are on our offshore islands. So the journey is starting. And also we talk about achieve a breakthrough science solution capable of eradicating at least one small mammalian predator from the mainland. So we believe we're going to do that through an engineering and science application, or maybe a biological science breakthrough. And there's a lot of work being done now, and there's going to be a lot of work done over the next 5 or 6 years where we're going to be heavily involved in investing in those spaces. we're talking about innovation. Obviously, we want to provoke innovation, and one of the things I've noticed by going around the country is how innovative people are within their current community groups or areas where they're working. When you meet them and you go and have a look at the projects and you have a look at what they're doing, there's lots of people around the country actually doing really neat things and very innovative things on the ground. Things that I've listed here in regards to research and development, trap design and layout. There's obviously a lot of work being done about that. We've got a lot of traps and different types of traps, but how do we best position them in the landscape? You know, what type of lures we can use, ones that can last for a long time so we can reduce the number of man hours or person hours to carry out that checking of the traps. Automation, camera technology. I caught up with Grant Ryan from Cacophony a little while ago, and originally he was really passionate, and I'm sure he still is, around sound, but now he's moved on to camera technology and believing that the way forward is to have these really smart, small cameras which are very low cost, and then we can get them out into the landscape and they can have some form of perhaps paintball type gun that can shoot a specific toxin that the predator then licks off. So his brain's whirring along in regards to a certain avenue, and there's other people I've met around the country talking about different types of data collection and different types of AI, which is incredibly amazing to see. Science breakthroughs, drones and biodegradable traps. I actually was speaking to someone the other day that, that might sound far-fetched, but there's actually some people in New Zealand that have actually thought about that concept of making a biodegradable trap that's very cheap and just decomposes on the ground once you've dropped it. It's currently they've done a little bit of work on it, but they haven't followed that through. But who knows where that's going to be in 2 to 3 or 5 years' time. So our current spending, and it's not a lot of money when you look at the total job out there of 26 million hectares. The government's put aside at the moment, basically we've got 16 million from 2016 to 2020 to spend on large landscape predator control work and eradication. And part of my job, as I've said, is to go out there and actually leverage that up from corporations and philanthropic organisations so that we can get double that to triple that amount of money. And then also want to spend, we have 4 million to spend on science research over the 2016-20 year period. Iwi, Hapu and Whanau strategic partnership. As I mentioned earlier, we want to have very close relationships with Māori. Principles of engagement is early and full and beyond consultation, collaborative development. We want to uphold the Treaty of Waitangi obligations on behalf of New Zealanders. One of the things that's also come out of these expressions of interest that we have actually got iwi putting in expression of interest directly. There's a lot of collaboration in a lot of the projects, but there's also some that have come in that are directly from iwi, and that's fantastic to see as well. We've also got a lot of partners and stakeholders involved with Free2050 Limited, and I'm very strongly of the mind and will that we want to be collaborative. And when I've gone around the country, you can see there's a lot of collaboration going on with a lot of the people. Landcare's name comes up a lot, and the Department of Conservation. In fact, just about every project I come and meet, there's either an ex-DOC staff member working for them, or they're working closely with DOC, which I believe is fantastic. Some of the things, obviously, Predator Free New Zealand, we work closely with them, and I've actually, my only other staff member on top of Dr. Dan Tompkins is Sonia Rafter, who's actually working out of the Predator Free New Zealand Trust offices at the moment, just on a temp basis. Obviously, we're dealing very closely with DOC and the National Science Challenge, the Biological Heritage Science Challenge, working very closely with them. And also starting to build a bit of a relationship with Osprey. As you all know, Osprey spends probably the most amount of money on predator control in New Zealand, and we want to work in closely with them so that we can have some synergies around what they're doing in their space, as well as what we want to do with the biodiversity gains. So in September 2017, we put out expressions of interest. I thought that, I was hopeful that we'd get around to 12 solid expressions of interest, but we actually ended up getting 45. And believe me, they're very good expressions of interest from a wide range of areas around New Zealand. There's a total area of 1.7 million hectares, which I mentioned, and if you use the costings that the projects have put in, we're at $53 million per annum in regards to what the costs would be to do those projects. There's over 100 collaborators and over 40 fund providers. So incredibly exciting as far as I'm concerned, because it's not like we got one or two and where do we go from here. We've actually got a lot of opportunities out there in New Zealand, and not everyone, unfortunately, is going to get across the line with PF2050's funding at this stage, because we just haven't got the money. But my ambition is obviously to go and find that money and to help fund these projects into the future. So this is just showing you where these projects are, not all of them, because some have wanted to remain confidential. So there's actually quite a few more green dots on the map there that you can't see. But you can see they're right across New Zealand and incredibly exciting. And I think Ruud was talking about the biodiversity and getting the people behind our projects and children and so forth. But every one of these projects has got the opportunity to bring the community into the bigger story about what we're doing. And we've seen that with the sanctuaries on the mainland. Zealandia, I was down there a little while ago, and Wellington's got this amazing movement going down there because they've got Zealandia that's sort of shown people what you can do by creating a sanctuary on the mainland, and that you can get all this biodiversity back into your city. And other cities are now following the same lead. And so we've got these halos around New Zealand. We want to build on those halos and create larger landscapes. The past Parliamentary Commissioner, Dr. Jan Wright, did us a huge favour with her recent paper that came out around looking after our birds and the state of our biodiversity. 80% of our birds are threatened, 80% of our reptiles. And very sad to hear, but there's positives about that, about the fact that we want to have bigger landscapes to be able to get more diversification. We've got climate change, which means we can't just leave all our birds and biodiversity on islands. It's got to get back onto our mainland and over a wide range. So the time frames, you may have seen if you've looked on the website, we're now in the evaluation process of the large landscape projects, and at the moment we're aiming to shortlist by the 24th of November, but that's probably going to be unlikely at this point in time, given that we've had such a good turnout of expressions of interest. So it's likely that I'll defer that out at this point in time. And we're hoping to, obviously by mid-February, depending on the due diligence, be able to actually give out some money to the projects that get selected. On the science strategy, there's been a huge amount of work been done on that, and it's been put together by leading scientists in New Zealand with some key international experts as well. It's convened by the Biological Heritage National Science Challenge, and we've also had the past chief scientist for the Prime Minister, not sure if Peter Gluckman still is, I couldn't say, but also had a look over the strategy and supports it. And we've also embedded with that the considerations around social licence, cultural acceptability, ecology and the policy regulatory landscape. I just want to key one of the things that we've talked about in there is environment and society. We'll explore social and cultural views about predator eradication. We totally understand that we need to socialise, particularly around the genetic technology, whether it's editing or gene drives. You may have heard some of the conversations that have been going on around the country, and we have had Kevin Ensfeld here from America, and it's just one stream of research that we want to look into. We're certainly not going to do anything in New Zealand in regards to lab testing and so forth, but we definitely need to. It would be negligent of us if we don't look at every avenue in regards to achieving the PF 2050 goals. And so we do want to look at the gene technology, but we want to make sure that we are dealing and working with the public of New Zealand on the way through. Eradicating the last percent, we also want to spend a lot of research money in that space. One of the ones that comes to my mind is possums. It's, in the time that I've been here, I'm hearing that the one that we can achieve eradication probably with the tools that we've currently got right now are possums. But we want to be able to work out how do we deal with that last 1%, because that's the most expensive, is removing that last 1% of the predators. And so we want to invest in the research around how we go about that. And that's the same with mustelids and with rats. Computer modelling. We also want to spend some money on the computer modelling in regards to the fact that when I move around the country, there's lots of people doing different things in regards to their databases and collecting information. We want to be able to create a model that people can actually click into and actually put the scenario of their landscape and the predators that they have and do some scenario modelling around what would be the best methods to do the suppression or eradication. So we've got 26 million hectares become predator-free. It's a giant job, and when I first came to this job, it was likened to climbing Mount Everest, and I have no doubt about the challenge. But it's the same as Edmund Hillary, when he would have looked at Mount Everest first, when he decided he wanted to climb that mountain. It would have been extremely daunting. And he did a lot of his time, obviously, climbing through the mountains of New Zealand and offshore before he embarked on that massive challenge. But he did do it, and he did it with the technology of the day, and we're going to do the same thing in New Zealand with the technology that we've got today. But we've got the opportunity that there's so much advancement going on in AI and science and gene technology that I definitely believe it's very achievable that we can achieve this goal. And thank you.